She didn't raise her voice when the beer hit her table, didn't flinch when the amber liquid arced through the dim bar light and splashed across her fries, didn't even glance up when the laughter started loud and careless from the group of Marines 3 tables over. Commander Elena Graves just set down her water glass, picked up a napkin, and began dabbing at the spill with the kind of methodical precision that comes from years of controlling exactly what the world gets to see. Because the woman in the corner booth wasn't there to drink. She wasn't there to socialize. She was there to observe. And the 4 men who just made her their joke had no idea they were being evaluated by the one person who would decide whether they ever wore the patch that mattered. But before we show you how their 72 hours unraveled, how a bar incident became a masterclass in leadership, and how 4 cocky Marines learned that respect isn't demanded, it's demonstrated. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Tap that like button, hit subscribe, and make sure notifications are on. Because sometimes the most dangerous commander in the room is the one who lets you keep talking. The lights inside Anchor Point Tavern always ran a little too dim, like the place had made peace with being forgotten by everyone except the people who needed it. It sat just off Route 76 outside Naval Station San Diego, wedged between a tire shop that closed at 5 and a pawnbroker who never seemed to open at all. The walls were dark wood, scarred with decades of initials and inside jokes that nobody remembered anymore. The jukebox in the corner had been broken since 2018. The floor had that soft give that comes from years of spilled beer and boot scuff, and the weight of 1,000 conversations that nobody wanted overheard. There was no dress code, no live music, no questions asked, which is why it was always full by 2000 hours. The woman at the corner table didn't look like she belonged, at least not at first glance. Dark gray hoodie, black cargo pants, no patches, no unit pride, no jewelry, no makeup, no alcohol in front of her, just water with a lemon wedge and a basket of fries she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. She sat with her back to the wall, not to the door. A subtle distinction most people missed. The kind of choice that separates those who've been trained from those who've been tested. The bartender, a man named Ray Colton, passed by without fanfare and placed a fresh glass of ice water on her table. No smile, no small talk, just a nod. She returned it. One of those slow, deliberate gestures that said thank you without asking for conversation. Ray was 62, gray-beard forearms still thick from a career that had ended 15 years ago, but never really left him. Master Chief retired. Desert Storm. 3 tours. The kind of man who knew how to read a room and when to stay quiet. He'd never asked her name. Didn't need to. Something about the way she moved straight, backed, without stiffness, hands loose but never idle, gaze still but never passive, told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't known by name here, not by most. But something about her presence, her posture carried weight enough that Ray never carded her. Enough that the regulars, even the loud ones, gave her space. She hadn't spoken since she walked in. That quiet was about to be broken. The door swung open, hard hinges protesting, and 4 men entered like they owned the oxygen in the room. Tan camouflage uniform sleeves half rolled at the elbows, chest pockets, sagging from too many hours in field rotation. Their boots were dusty, their laughs louder than necessary. Not locals, not regulars, temporary. The kind of men whose assignments gave them just enough time to grow cocky, but not long enough to learn humility. They took the high-top table near the center of the bar. The tallest one, broad-shouldered with a jawline that looked like it had been carved for propaganda posters, waved Ray down with 2 fingers and a smirk. "Rounds for the table," he said. "Top shelf. Let's make it a welcome party." "Welcome to what?" the smaller one asked, leg bouncing with nervous energy. "To the only decent bar within 10 clicks that doesn't play country music," the third one said, dragging his stool back with a scrape that made half the room wince. The fourth had already noticed the woman. 10 o'clock, he muttered. "Solo table. Civilian maybe. Contractor." The tall one shrugged. "Ghost program probably, or someone's ex." A round of laughter. Not mean yet, just lazy, confident, curious in the way young wolves are before they test the pack. They kept their distance for now, but their eyes drifted. They didn't know her name, didn't know her face, but they noticed her silence. And that was enough to make assumptions, enough to think they understood her. The woman didn't shift, didn't react. She lifted her glass, drank slowly, and returned it to the exact center of the coaster. From their table, one of them leaned forward, grinning. She looks like she's memorizing the exits. The tall one chuckled. Maybe she's waiting for backup. They all laughed again, but what they couldn't know, was that the only reason she was still sitting there was because she hadn't made up her mind about them yet. Commander Elena Graves had been in this bar for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of watching the television above the bar cycle through muted news weather radar, slicing across the California coastline in bands of green and yellow. 40 minutes of not touching her fries. 40 minutes of letting her mind run through the files she'd memorized that afternoon. Corporal Garrett Sutherland, 28, Marine Recon, 2 deployments, Iraq and Afghanistan, solid marks in field leadership, marginal marks in team cohesion. Flagged twice for insubordination, both times dismissed after peer testimony. The kind of operator who got results but left friction in his wake. Corporal Deacon Cross, 26, communications specialist, high technical scores, nervous under live fire conditions. Psych eval noted anxiety management issues. Recommended for additional stress inoculation training, but never received it. Private Hollis Tremaine, 25, field medic, competent, quiet, no disciplinary record, no commendations either. The kind of operator who disappeared into the middle of every formation. Lance Corporal Owen Briggs, 30, oldest of the group, former Force Recon downgraded after shoulder injury. Father was career military, Iraq 2003. Psych notes indicated high situational awareness, low tolerance for incompetence. She knew their records. She knew their scores. But she didn't know how they moved when nobody was grading him. Didn't know what they said when they thought command wasn't listening. Didn't know if they had the kind of judgment that couldn't be taught in a schoolhouse. That's why she was here. Off duty, out of uniform, invisible. Admiral James Keller had given her 72 hours to evaluate them for integration into Joint Special Operations Task Force 7. 72 hours to decide if these 4 Marines could function alongside Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Air Force, Pararescue, and every other high-speed unit that didn't tolerate weakness or ego or the kind of recklessness that got people killed. 72 hours to make sure she didn't repeat the mistake that still woke her up some nights. Chest-tight breath, shallow vision full of smoke and fire, and the sound of a name she couldn't save. Daniel Rourke, she pushed the thought down. Not here. Not now. By the 3rd round, the volume of the group had doubled. One of them started doing impressions, a bad CO voice barking nonsense orders. Another spun a story about a helicopter insertion gone sideways in the Hindu Kush, clearly embellished pauses timed for maximum effect. But it wasn't the noise that mattered. It was the moment one of them, the tall one, Sutherland, turned from the table to gesture with his beer. He swung wide, trying to punctuate the punchline of a joke nobody outside their circle would understand. His elbow high, his boot catching the side of a loose chair leg behind him. Off balance for just half a second, just long enough for his pint glass to tip. Amber liquid arced clean through the air. It splashed across her table. Half her fries were soaked. The water glass tipped but didn't fall. A line of beer ran across the tabletop, dripping slowly into her lap. For a moment, the bar paused, just enough to clock the moment, just enough to decide whether this was going to be a thing or not. Then came the laughter. Sutherland turned, saw the mess, and held both palms up. "Whoa, my bad. That one's on the chair, not me." The others howled. "Damn thing moved on its own," the one with the nervous legs said. "Maybe it's her fault," another added. "What's she doing sitting that close to a combat zone anyway?" The woman, Elena Graves, commander, United States Navy SEAL Team 11, calmly set her napkin down, picked up her water glass, shifted it back into place, then began dabbing her lap without urgency, without expression, without even glancing in their direction. That rattled them more than it should have. "You all right over there?" Sutherland called out, clearly expecting a glare, a sharp word, maybe a middle finger. "You need a towel, or maybe just a sense of humor." Ray appeared from behind the bar, silent as always, and handed her a fresh napkin, a dry glass of water. "Appreciate it," she said quietly. Her voice was low, clear, measured. That was the first time any of them had heard it. "You're not gonna throw that one back at us," the twitchy one Cross asked, half laughing. She looked at him. One clean glance, no heat, no challenge. Then back to the napkin, no words. That's when the tone shifted. They didn't say it aloud, not yet. But the absence of drama, the lack of fury or embarrassment started to itch under their skin. The way she wiped her hands. The way she reorganized the table, precise, deliberate, like this had happened before. Like she was giving them rope. It didn't land the way they thought it would. "Maybe she's just uptight," one muttered. "She's probably writing a Yelp review in her head right now," said another. "0 stars. Marine's too rowdy." That got a chuckle. But the woman didn't move, didn't speak again. She just shifted her chair slightly back, not away from them, but to an angle that opened her field of view. Then she exhaled, once barely audible, and went back to watching the radar on the television, as if their storm hadn't even made landfall. Elena Graves had learned a long time ago that silence was a weapon, not the kind that killed, the kind that made people kill themselves. Give a man enough quiet, and he'll fill it with exactly the truth you need to hear. She was counting. Sutherland, the loud one, had hesitated for 2 full seconds before calling out to her. That hesitation meant doubt, meant he knew on some level that he'd crossed a line, but didn't want to admit it in front of his team. Cross, the twitchy one, had laughed the loudest. Overcompensation. Insecurity. The kind of operator who needed external validation to feel like he belonged. Tremaine, the quiet one, hadn't laughed at all, just watched. No judgment either way. A follower. Useful in the right structure, dangerous in the wrong one. And Briggs, the older one. He'd glanced at her twice, not with amusement, with assessment. He was reading the room, reading her. That made him either the smartest or the most dangerous. She filed it all away. By the 4th round, the table had started orbiting her like flies too bored to stay still. Not direct, not obvious. Just enough to keep her in their periphery, to see if the next provocation might tip her into something reactive. She remained still. They didn't like that. It was Cross who stood first. He did it casually, carrying his fresh drink with theatrical care, like he was trying not to spill it again, grinning at his friends as he meandered toward her side of the bar. "Truce drink," he offered, holding it out. She didn't look up. He held the glass a little higher, looming just near her elbow. "Least I can do after nearly drowning your fries." She glanced at the glass. It was sweating already. A small droplet traced down the side, pooling on her coaster. "No thank you," she said. Not rude, not defensive, just final. He set the glass down anyway, right on the edge of her table. And when she didn't touch it, didn't even flinch, he leaned closer. "You're kind of a mystery, you know that?" From behind him, Sutherland called out. "Careful, Cross. She might be CIA. Could be profiling all of us right now." "Could be," Cross said, grinning wider. "I always thought I had good bone structure for a file photo." Then casually, far too casually, he bumped the drink forward. It tipped. Not violently, not obviously, just enough to send a slow wash of whiskey across her table. Over the napkin she just folded, pooling at the edge before dripping off and soaking the cuff of her sleeve. The table roared with laughter. She still didn't react, just stared at the spreading stain like it was the most unoriginal thing she'd seen all day. Ray froze behind the bar. You could feel him weighing the moment, how far to step in without making it worse. She calmly stood. Her chair didn't scrape. She moved it with control, not retreat, took 2 steps sideways, lifted the edge of her jacket to shake off the moisture, then turned not to them but to the other side of the bar. There was an open 2-top near the wall. She crossed the floor and sat down, this time with her back to the room. But before she did, she said it. Just one sentence, over her shoulder. Soft, even. "You should have spilled the first drink better. This one made it too obvious." The laughter stopped. Cross blinked. "What?" She didn't repeat it, didn't need to. At the table, Sutherland leaned in. "Wait, what did she just say?" "Something about the first drink," Cross muttered, suddenly less confident. "No," said the quietest of them, Briggs, his brows knit together. "She said we made it obvious." They looked at each other, suddenly unsure if this was still funny, suddenly aware that the woman they'd been mocking hadn't reacted the way anyone ever reacted. Not with anger, not with embarrassment, with assessment. Back at her new table, she lifted the fresh glass of water Ray had already set down for her, took a sip, adjusted the collar of her jacket, and resumed watching the muted television now cycling through highlights from a carrier deck, landing jets catching wire in perfect mechanical rhythm. She didn't look at them again. She didn't have to, because somehow, without touching a thing, without raising her voice, without giving them a single moment of the confrontation they'd been fishing for, she'd just changed the air in the entire room. The table quieted, not all at once, but in stages, like a joke dragging too long and until it loops back into discomfort. Cross returned to his seat without the same swagger. The others shifted in their chairs, glancing toward the woman's new table with more calculation than curiosity. Sutherland, the tall one, leaned back and crossed his arms, trying to reclaim the vibe. "She's got some ice in her spine," he muttered. "Thinks she's special forces?" The one with the buzz cut snorted. "She's got contractor boots. Bet she teaches classroom stuff. Safety compliance or something." Briggs, the fourth one, hadn't spoken much all night, but now he did. "She never looked at us like we were funny," he said. "Not once," Sutherland shrugged. "So doesn't mean anything. Some people are just wired up tight." "War," Cross said, trying to salvage his confidence. "She's nursing a dishonorable and trying not to get recognized." Briggs didn't laugh this time. He just wiped his hand on a napkin, the whiskey still tacky on his fingers. "She moved tables after 2 spills," he said slowly. "Didn't flinch either time. That's not someone new to this. That's someone avoiding a scene." "She's playing invisible," Sutherland replied. "You see how calm she was? That's not power. That's someone who doesn't want attention." Briggs looked at him. "Or someone who's done this dance before and knows exactly when to step out of the spotlight." Sutherland scoffed. "Look, if she was anyone important, someone in this place would have saluted by now. Or she'd be with a detail. Or at least not drinking water like a high school teacher." But even as he said it, something in his voice wavered, because none of them could shake the feeling that they'd just been weighed, measured, and cataloged by someone who hadn't needed to say a word to do it. Elena Graves sat at her new table and let the silence do the work. She'd learned this technique years ago during her second year at btch from a man who was sitting at the far end of the bar right now, nursing a beer and pretending not to watch. Master Chief Bill Hargrove, 67 years old, retired. Desert Storm veteran, the man who'd pushed her through pool comp on her third failed attempt. The man who'd told her in that gravel voice of his that leadership wasn't about being the loudest in the room. It was about being the last one standing when the loud ones burned out. He'd been her instructor, her mentor. And the reason she was sitting here tonight, letting 4 Marines hang themselves with their own rope, she didn't look at him, didn't need to. She knew he was watching, knew he'd seen the whole thing, knew he'd already made his assessment and was waiting to see if hers matched. Back near the wall, she watched the television. A night landing, wheels hitting deck, arresting wire catching. The kind of precision that looked easy, but required thousands of hours of training, failure recalibration, and trust. She thought about Rourke, about Kandahar, about the moment she tried to speak up and been told to stand down, about the sound of the explosion and the way the silence afterward had been so complete it felt like the world had ended. She thought about the 4 men behind her laughing too loud, drinking too much, making the kind of mistakes that seemed harmless until they weren't. And she thought about the next 72 hours, whether they'd survive it, whether she'd let them. The woman stood 15 minutes later, didn't rush, just folded a napkin, dropped a few bills under her glass, and tugged the sleeve of her jacket once to straighten the cuff. The TV now cycled through grainy footage of a guided missile destroyer cutting through dark water bow lights, glowing like distant stars. She moved toward the exit, not out of fear, not retreat, just done. As she passed the table, none of them spoke, not at first. She walked between Sutherland and Cross without glancing in either direction. Calm, even, unhurried. Then Sutherland turned in his seat, voice lower now, leaning toward her just enough that only their table would hear. "Careful walking alone, sweetheart. You might bump into someone a little less patient." She stopped, not dramatically, just mid-step. Her head turned, no expression, no stare down, just enough to acknowledge the words. Then calmly, she looked at him and said, "Funny thing about predators, Corporal. They're the easiest ones to track. A pause, then she turned and left. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Cross let out a slow breath. That was specific. Tremaine shifted. She knew his rank. Sutherland tried to laugh, but it didn't land. His face had gone pale. How did she? None of them noticed the man at the end of the bar. Older, salt and pepper beard. Sleeves rolled up over faded tattoos, the kind you only got in certain units during certain decades. Master Chief Bill Hargrove had been watching the whole thing from behind his half-empty beer. He didn't smile, didn't speak. He just reached for his phone, opened his contacts, and started typing. Then he stood, dropped cash on the bar, and walked over to their table. "You boys just made a mistake," he said. Sutherland looked up, irritation flashing. "Who the hell are you, Pops?" Hargrove didn't blink. "Someone who knows exactly who that woman is. And you'll find out at 0630 tomorrow." He turned and walked out. The door clicked, shut again. For a long moment, the four of them just sat there. Cross finally broke the silence. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Briggs, the quiet one, the one who'd been watching it all night, spoke for the first time in 20 minutes. His voice was low, certain. "I think we just fucked up." Outside in the parking lot, Elena Graves stood beside her truck, the night air cool against her skin. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Clicked it off. 43 minutes of audio. Every word, every laugh, every moment of disrespect, escalation, and poor judgment. She opened the voice memo app on her phone and began logging her assessment. Corporal Garrett Sutherland, impulsive, seeks dominance through volume, needs to prove authority in every interaction. Potential for leadership if ego can be managed. Recommend isolation training and direct accountability measures. She paused, replayed the moment he'd called her sweetheart. Flagged for dismissive language toward unknown contacts, indicative of broader respect issues. Next, Corporal Deacon Cross, insecure, escalates to prove worth to peers, follows Sutherland's lead without independent judgment, anxiety markers visible under mild social pressure, recommends stress inoculation and decision-making autonomy exercises. She clicked forward. Private Hollis Tremaine, follower, no independent action observed, laughed when others laughed, stopped when others stopped, neutral presence, requires structure and clear chain of command, potentially reliable if properly led. And finally, Lance Corporal Owen Briggs, only member of group to exhibit situational awareness, did not participate in second spill, observed rather than escalated. Father Force Recon Iraq 2003, background suggests trained perception. Recommend further evaluation, high potential. She saved the file, encrypted it, sent it to her personal server. Then she stood there for a moment looking back at the bar, the lights inside warm and hazy through the windows, the sound of laughter muffled but persistent. She thought about walking back inside, about showing them her ID, about watching their faces drain of color when they realized exactly who they just disrespected. But that wasn't the play. The play was patience. The play was 72 hours. The play was watching them unravel under the weight of their own choices in front of the entire base, in front of their peers, in front of the one person whose evaluation would follow them for the rest of their careers. She climbed into her truck, started the engine, and drove back toward the base. Tomorrow morning, 0630 Joint Operations Briefing Room, they'd find out who she was, and by tomorrow night, they'd understand what it cost them. At 0600 hours, the admin wing of Naval Station San Diego buzzed with the kind of quiet efficiency that only military installations ever managed. Everything smelled like strong coffee and burnt toner. Overhead lights hummed softly. Steel doors clicked shut with just enough pressure to remind people where they were. Down the far hallway behind a frosted glass door marked Joint Operations Integration Office Clearance Required. Commander Elena Graves sat at her desk reviewing the finalized rotation schedule. She was in uniform now, crisp, pressed. The single gold trident above her left chest pocket caught the fluorescent light. The rectangular black patch on her left shoulder, no text, just an embedded RFID strip, opened every secure door on the installation. And the tablet in her hand carried the names of 56 personnel assigned to Task Force 7, 4 SEAL platoons, Marine Recon elements, EOD techs, cyber ops liaison, and one four-man inter-unit attachment team that she'd been personally assigned to evaluate. A quiet knock came from the door. "Ma'am," said a petty officer stepping in with a folder. "Admin confirms the Marine attachment team arrived last night. Their eval cycle starts today." Graves took the file without looking up. She already knew what it said. Corporal Garrett Sutherland, Corporal Deacon Cross, Lance Corporal Owen Briggs, Private Hollis Tremaine. She nodded once. No visible reaction. The petty officer hesitated. "Problem, ma'am." Graves signed the last line of the schedule with a stylus. "Not yet." She handed the tablet back, closed the folder and stood. Posture precise, not stiff. There was no urgency in the way she moved. No hint of escalation, just method. "Confirm their unit lead knows they'll be participating in the joint readiness brief this afternoon." "Yes, ma'am. They're scheduled to be present at 0630. "Good." Graves picked up her cover from the desk. "Make sure the seating is staggered. I don't want them all together." The petty officer blinked, then nodded. "Understood, ma'am." Graves exited the room without further comment. In the hallway, two instructors paused their conversation as she passed. One of them, a logistics officer, murmured, "That's Commander Graves, right?" "Yeah," the other replied, voice low. "Took over integration oversight after Lieutenant Marquez rotated out. She's a SEAL, command qualified, 3 tours, signals and extraction ops. No media record, no public bio, ghost file." The first one whistled softly. "She doesn't look like command." "That's the point." Graves moved past them without acknowledgement. Down the corridor, past the wall of file cabinets, through the outer prep room. She paused beside the large glass panel overlooking the operations bay below. Marines ran ladder drills. SEALs cycled through room-clearing rotations. Sweat, commands, timing, all visible from where she stood. Her reflection stared back at her through the glass. "Civilian last night, commander today." She watched them for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly as she saw 4 men in tan camis pass through the far gate. Loud, confident, clueless. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She just folded the schedule, slid it into her pocket, and turned toward the briefing room. It was time. The readiness briefing room wasn't built to intimidate, but it always managed to. Square, windowless, painted the exact shade of gray that made everything inside feel 1 decibel quieter. The long table stretched from one end to the other, surrounded by 2 rows of chairs. Front row for lead evaluators, back for operators and junior staff. A digital projector hummed quietly from the ceiling, looping a silent slideshow. Chain of command, unit objectives, 0 failure expectations. Corporal Garrett Sutherland swaggered in first, uniform not quite pressed. Boots passable, demeanor unbothered. Behind him came Cross, Tremaine, and Briggs, all wearing the same mild hangover masked as overconfidence. None of them recognized the room. None of them cared to. "Guess this is where they tell us to play nice with the Navy boys," Cross muttered, tossing his field folder onto the table like it owed him something. Tremaine smirked. "Maybe we're getting medals." Briggs didn't speak. A few SEAL candidates were already seated in the far corner. They didn't engage, just watched. One of them subtly elbowed the guy next to him and nodded toward the Marine attachment group. The second guy raised an eyebrow, whispered something. They both smirked. But the shift came when the side door opened. No fanfare, no announcement, just boots on linoleum. Lieutenant Commander Elena Graves walked in, full uniform, trident gleaming like it had never been touched by dirt, command patch visible on her left shoulder, shoulders relaxed, eyes already scanning the room as if she'd been standing in it before they ever arrived. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Sutherland froze mid-comment. His eyes flicked to her face, and something behind his grin started to decay. Cross blinked once, then again. His legs stopped bouncing. Tremaine whispered, "No way." Briggs leaned forward slowly as if by leaning he could undo last night. Graves walked to the center of the room and set a single folder on the table. Her hands moved without flourish. She stood behind the chair at the head of the table but didn't sit. "Good morning," she said. One sentence and the room stilled. Today's session is a joint operational integrity evaluation. Cross-unit behavior and cohesion are under direct review for upcoming task force assignments. She didn't raise her voice, but the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Some of the Marines began to shift in their seats, shoulders squaring, hands coming off thighs, folders suddenly opening. Suddenly, no one laughed. Graves turned the page in her folder. You've each been assigned to temporary integrated teams. Your cohesion ratings will be submitted at the end of the week. She looked directly at Sutherland. He swallowed once. Then she glanced at Tremaine, then Cross, one by one. No emotion, no theatrics, just recognition. Like she wasn't introducing herself at all, just confirming what they already should have known. A ripple of whispers passed down the row of SEALs in the back. Someone exhaled softly and whispered, "Oh damn, that's her." No one said a word after that, and for the first time since they walked in, Corporal Garrett Sutherland sat up straight, like he couldn't quite remember how tall he was supposed to be. Graves continued without pause. The operational circuit isn't complicated. 12 stations, 4-member teams, each task pulled from real-world scenarios. Field radio calibration under noise jamming, rapid gear reassembly blindfolded. EVAC protocol drill under false fire alarm, simulated civilian interaction with conflicting rules of engagement. She set the folder down and looked at them again. It's not designed to punish, but it punishes arrogance all the same. Her voice remained conversational, clinical, like a surgeon reading vital signs. Team 3, she said calmly. Corporal Sutherland, Corporal Cross, Lance Corporal Briggs, Private Tremaine, Station 6. They stood, slower than before. Be advised, she continued, this is a personnel prioritization drill. 3 hostiles, 2 unarmed civilians, 1 wounded ally, 5-minute window, command decisions logged on audio. Sutherland grinned, trying to summon what little bravado he had left. We've run this scenario before, ma'am. Graves glanced up, not at him, through him. Then you'll be familiar with what failure looks like. No smile, just clinical acknowledgement. The other SEALs leaned forward now, not to interfere, just to watch. The timer beeped. They started the drill. 2 minutes and Cross misidentified the wounded ally and flagged him as hostile. Tremaine hesitated, then overcorrected, neutralizing one of the civilians with a training rifle. Sutherland began arguing mid-scenario, voice rising, trying to override Cross's call. Briggs tried to regroup them, but his voice cracked under the pressure of Sutherland's volume. 4 minutes in, the alarm buzzed. Graves clicked her pen. Failure, she said. Ma'am, we had conflicting data on the civilian, Sutherland began. She cut him off without looking up. You had conflicting ego. The room went still. She stepped forward, picked up their evaluation sheet, and handed it to a nearby instructor, then turned to the rest of the room. We will repeat the same drill at 15:30 hours. Those who pass the first time will rotate to instruction. Those who failed will observe from the wall. Cross opened his mouth, but said nothing. Graves met his eye. Speak, Corporal, he faltered. It's just I didn't realize civilians were tracking our movement from last night. A few SEALs stiffened. Graves didn't blink. Neither did I. Good thing I wasn't a civilian. The line hit like a rifle crack. The silence after was longer than the sentence itself. Then she moved on, issuing new assignments. The exercise continued, but something had shifted. In the next hour, no one joked. No one shouted across the room. Everyone's posture recalibrated. At the far end of the row, a young tech operator leaned toward his team lead and whispered, "She really let them hang themselves." The team lead just nodded. That's command, quiet correction. Back at the original table, Sutherland rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly hyper-aware of the clipboard in Graves's hand. Tremaine muttered, "She's not going to forget, is she?" Briggs exhaled. "She doesn't need to remember. She already documented it." And Cross, who had spent most of the morning trying to shrink into his uniform, just sat there. Still, like someone finally realizing how far their voice echoes when the room isn't laughing with them anymore. At 0500 the next morning, the Pacific Ocean was black and cold and unforgiving. The kind of cold that didn't care about rank or reputation or how confident you'd been 24 hours ago. Commander Graves stood on the beach in full wetsuit arms, crossed watching four Marines wade into the surf with the kind of reluctance that told her everything she needed to know about how their night had gone. Full gear, she'd said at the brief. 2 hours, cold water conditioning. If you fall behind, the ocean doesn't wait. Sutherland had tried to make eye contact with his team, tried to rally them with some platitude about toughing it out, but his voice had been hollow. The weight of yesterday's failure still hung on him like wet canvas. Now they were in it. Were in, chest deep, waves rolling over their heads every 20 seconds. Graves walked the shoreline calm, dry watching. She didn't yell encouragement, didn't bark orders, just observed. Sutherland struggled. Pride wouldn't let him quit, but his breath came ragged. Cross vomited twice seawater, and bile kept going anyway. Tremaine went hypothermic at the 90-minute mark, lips blue, hands shaking. Briggs stayed close to him, helping him stay upright. That's when Graves's radio crackled. "Commander Graves, this is Station Ops. We have an emergency beacon. Fishing vessel taking water 2 miles offshore. 3 crew, Coast Guard ETA 20 minutes. Vessel has 10. Graves didn't hesitate. She keyed the radio. "Acknowledged. Closest assets." "You are, ma'am." She looked at the 4 men in the water, exhausted, cold, barely functional. Then she made the call. "Sutherland," she shouted over the surf, "get your team to shore, now." They staggered out, confused, shivering. She met them at the waterline. Fishing vessel sinking 2 miles out. 3 crew. Coast Guard is 20 minutes away. The boat has 10. We're the closest asset. Sutherland blinked, water streaming down his face. "Ma'am, we're not qualified." "You're qualified if I say you are." Graves cut him off. "This is your evaluation. Real world, real stakes, go or fail. Your call." For 3 seconds, Sutherland didn't move, didn't breathe. Then he looked at his team, at Cross still pale from vomiting, at Tremaine hypothermic and shaking, at Briggs the only one still standing straight. "We go," Sutherland said. Graves nodded once. "Then listen to every word I say and execute exactly as ordered." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." They swam. Graves commanded from the support boat, voice steady over the radio, directing their approach. Sutherland followed her orders to the letter. No improvisation, no cowboy moves, just execution. Cross handled comms under pressure, relaying coordinates to Coast Guard, with hands so cold he could barely key the mic. Briggs applied first aid to an injured crew member, hypothermia be damned, fingers working through the shakes. Tremaine overcame his fear, dove twice for a trapped crew member wedged in the cabin as the boat listed 30 degrees. All 3 crew recovered. The vessel sank as they cleared the hull. Coast Guard arrived 4 minutes later to find them floating in a raft, exhausted, bloody, victorious. "Good work," the Coast Guard petty officer called over. "Who led this?" Graves, pulling herself into the support boat, looked at the 4 Marines. "They did," she said. "I observed." 2 hours later in the medical bay, wrapped in thermal blankets, they sat in silence. Sutherland had a gash above his eye from a piece of debris. Cross's hands were bandaged from rope burn. Tremaine was on a saline drip for dehydration. Briggs looked like he'd aged 5 years. Graves walked in, still in her wetsuit, hair tied back, face calm. "Why did you trust us?" Sutherland asked. His voice was quiet now, different. Graves considered him for a long moment. "I didn't," she said. "I trusted myself to pull you out if you failed." Cross looked up. "That's the first time someone's believed we could do something." "Belief isn't free," Graves replied. "You earned it today." There was a pause, then Sutherland asked the question he had been holding since last night. "Ma'am, how do you stay that calm even when everything's on fire?" Graves pulled up a chair, sat down. For the first time since they'd met her, she looked almost human, almost tired. "I'll tell you," she said, "tonight. All of you, off the record." At 1900 hours, she took them to the memorial wall, a long corridor in the east wing, names etched in black granite, faces in photographs, dates, units, some with medals pinned beside them, some with flowers still fresh. She stopped in front of one name, Petty Officer Daniel Rourke, SEAL Team 11, KIA Kandahar 2011. "My swim buddy," Graves said. "Bud's Class 301, killed 14 years ago." The 4 Marines stood silent. "I was a junior officer," she continued. We were tasked with breaching a compound. High-value target. I recommended a different breach point. Saw the terrain, saw the approach, knew the enemy would expect frontal assault. She paused, touched the photograph. Rourke smiling in his dress uniform. Young, confident. Senior SEAL commander overruled me, told me to leave tactics to those with experience. Said, and I quote, "Sweetheart, you worry about comms. Let the men handle the breach." Sutherland's jaw tightened. His plan was exactly what the enemy expected, Graves said. Frontal assault, no surprises. IED triggered the moment we entered. Rourke was on point. He died instantly. She turned to look at them. I was calm that day too. Too calm. Too afraid to push back harder. Too worried about proving I deserved to be there. And it cost him his life. Cross-spoke voice barely above a whisper. That's why you're so hard on us. No, Graves said. I'm hard on you because I see potential. If I didn't, I would have failed you on day one. But you need to understand something. Every decision you make in the field, every moment you let ego override judgment, every time you think the rules don't apply to you, you're not just risking yourself. You're risking the person next to you, the person who trusted you, the person whose family will get a folded flag because you needed to feel important. She let that sit. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor. Master Chief Bill Hargrove appeared. Older, gray, weathered. He wore a leather jacket over a faded navy t-shirt. His eyes scanned the four Marines, then settled on Graves. Commander, but he said. Master Chief, Graves replied. Didn't expect to see my methodology in action. Yeah, still teaching by observation, Graves said. Hargrove smiled, slight, warm. Just watching my best student work. He turned to the Marines. You boys have no idea what kind of officer is standing in front of you. Sutherland straightened. Sir, we're starting to understand. Hargrove stepped closer to the memorial wall, looked at Rourke's name. I knew him, he said. Good kid, Fichet's, smart, died because someone didn't listen to the smartest person in the room. He looked at Graves. She's the only BUDS instructor who made me reconsider women in special operations. Not because she was good for a woman, because she was better than most men. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a trident pin, old, scratched, the gold worn down to brass in places. Wore this through Desert Storm, Hargrove said. 91, ground offensive into Kuwait. Nasty business. He looked at the Marines. Had a female intel officer tell me our attack route was compromised. I ignored her, figured she hadn't been in field combat. What did she know? He paused. Lost 2 men that night. Good men. She was right. I was loud, and loud got people killed. He handed the pin to Graves. Brought me home from Iraq. Rourke would want them to have a chance. Graves took it, closed her hand around it, nodded once. Hargrove turned and walked back down the corridor without another word. The 4 Marines stood there, silent, the weight of the conversation settling over them like a physical thing. Finally, Sutherland spoke. Ma'am, I need to tell you something. Graves looked at him. I'm going through a divorce, he said. Custody battle. My daughter's 8. She thinks I'm a hero. I've been trying so hard to prove I deserve that I forgot what it actually means. I've been loud because I'm afraid someone will see I'm empty. Graves's expression softened, just barely. Your daughter doesn't need a hero, Corporal. She needs a father who knows when to follow orders. That's real strength. Sutherland's jaw worked, emotions threatening to crack the surface. I don't know if I can change. You already did, Graves said. You asked for help. That's command. At 0400 the next morning, the final evolution began. The compound mock-up on the north side of base. 2-story structure. 12 rooms, hidden corners, simulated IEDs, live fire authorized with training rounds. The scenario, high-value target extraction. 12 hostiles. 4 hostages, 45-minute window before enemy reinforcements arrived. But Commander Graves had added a complication. Halfway through the brief, she stopped, looked at them. New intelligence. One of the 4 hostages is an enemy agent. Deep cover, bad intel on which one. You have to decide. Extract all 4 and risk the agent escaping, or leave one behind and risk leaving an innocent. The room went silent. Sutherland looked at his team. This was it. The test. The moment that would define whether they passed or failed, whether they deployed or went home. 30 seconds to decision point, Graves said. Clock starts now. Sutherland closed his eyes, breathed. When he opened them, he wasn't the same man who'd walked into Anchor Point 3 nights ago. We extract 3, he said. Detain the 4th separately. Briggs, you analyze micro-expressions during initial contact. Cross, you monitor comms intercept for any phone signals. Tremaine, you're on medical for confirmed hostages. I'll lead breach and provide cover. Graves didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted. Execute, she said. They moved like a different team. Sutherland breached methodically, communicated constantly, listened to his team's input, and adjusted in real time. Briggs identified the agent through subtle behavioral cues, stress patterns that didn't match the situation. Cross confirmed it through a phone ping. They extracted 3 hostages safely and detained the 4th without incident. 42 minutes, 3 minutes to spare. When they emerged from the compound covered in dust and sweat, and the kind of exhaustion that only comes from perfect execution, Graves was waiting. You passed, she said, all 4 of you. Sutherland stared at her. Even me. Especially you. You learned the hardest lesson. Leadership is knowing when you don't know. She turned to walk away, then paused. Official clearance for joint operations. Approved. Report to admin for assignment processing. Cross let out a breath he'd been holding for 3 days. Tremaine actually smiled. Briggs nodded, once respect in his eyes. But before they could celebrate, the door to the operations building opened. Admiral James Keller stepped out. 59, gray at the temples, 3 stars on his collar. The kind of officer who didn't appear unless something significant was happening. Commander Graves, he said, we have a situation. Graves straightened. Sir? Keller handed her a tablet. Intel from Syria. American journalist captured by militia forces. 72-hour window before execution video. Requires immediate 4-man team plus SEAL command. He looked at the 4 Marines, still covered in dust, still breathing hard. You 4, he said, plus Commander Graves. Wheels up in 6 hours. Sutherland blinked. Sir, we just qualified today. Graves turned to him. You're ready. Question is, do you trust that? Sutherland looked at his team. At Cross, who'd overcome panic. At Tremaine, who'd found courage. At Briggs, who'd been steady the whole time. Then he looked at Graves, the woman they disrespected. The woman who'd broken them down and built them back. The woman who'd given them a chance when she could have destroyed them. We trust you, ma'am, he said. Graves held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Good. Gear up. Briefing in 30 minutes. This isn't training anymore. The gear room smelled like gun oil and cordite and the kind of nervous sweat that comes before real missions. Sutherland checked his rifle for the 3rd time. Cross tested his radio encryption. Tremaine inventoried medical supplies with shaking hands. Briggs was already packed, calm, waiting. Graves entered. She was in full combat kit now. Plate carrier, sidearm, rifle. The trident on her chest seemed heavier somehow, more real. Objective, she said without preamble. Infiltrate compound. Secure American journalist. Extract without engagement if possible. Engagement authorized if necessary. Enemy force estimated at 30 plus. Intel suggests they're experienced. She pulled up a map on the tablet. Insertion via halo jump. Night ops, 8 kilometers to target. You'll move on foot. Briggs, you're on overwatch. Sniper position here. She pointed. Cross, you manage encrypted comms with Tactical Operations Center. Tremaine, you're on medical for the journalist. Sutherland, you breach with me. She looked at each of them. Timeline is 4 hours from boots on ground to exfil. Miss the window, reinforcements arrive, and we're compromised. Questions? Sutherland raised his hand. Ma'am, what if the situation changes? Then we adapt, Graves said. I'll be making tactical calls in real time. Your job is to execute without question. Trust the training, trust each other, trust that I will bring you home. She paused. Let that sink in. 72 hours ago, you didn't know me. Tonight, your life depends on me, and mine depends on you. That's what a team is. Master Chief Hargrove appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just looked at Graves. A long look. the kind that carried years of history and respect, and the weight of men who'd seen war and survived. Then he nodded once. She returned it, and that was all the blessing they needed. At 2200 hours, they walked across the tarmac toward the C-130. The night air was cool, the plane's engines already spinning turbines winding up to pitch. 5 figures in full kit, moving with purpose. Inside the cargo bay was loud and cold. They strapped in, checked gear one last time. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. Graves sat across from them. She pulled out Hargrove's old trident pin, the one from Desert Storm. Looked at it for a moment, then tucked it into her chest pocket. Sutherland watched her. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" She looked up. "Why did you give us a chance after what we did?" Graves was quiet for a long moment. The engines roared louder. The plane began to taxi. "Because someone gave me one," she said finally, "and because the best leaders aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who fail, learn, and make sure no one else has to fail the same way." The plane lifted off. Below them, San Diego disappeared into a grid of lights. Ahead, darkness and distance, and a mission that would test everything they'd learned in 72 hours. Graves closed her eyes, not to sleep, to prepare. And across from her, 4 Marines who'd been strangers 3 days ago, who'd laughed at her in a bar, who'd learned the hardest way what respect actually meant, sat ready to follow her into whatever came next. Because now they understood. Command wasn't loud. It was the quiet certainty that when everything went wrong, someone would be calm enough to make it right. The C-130 rattled through the night sky at 28,000 feet, the cargo bay filled with the steady drone of engines and the metallic smell of hydraulic fluid and sweat. The jump light glowed red above the ramp door. 5 minutes to drop zone. Commander Elena Graves ran through the checklist one more time in her head. Halo insertion, high altitude, low opening. Oxygen mass until 15,000 feet. Altimeter check. Formation discipline. 8 kilometers to target compound once they hit ground. 4 hours to extraction. She looked across the bay at the 4 Marines. Sutherland, checking his rifle again, methodical now, instead of nervous. Cross with eyes closed, breathing exercises, controlling the anxiety she'd seen in him 3 days ago. Tremaine reviewing medical protocols on a laminated card. Briggs motionless already in mission headspace. The loadmaster gave the 2-minute warning. They stood, checked each other's gear, oxygen masks secured, altimeters synced, weapons tied down. Graves moved down the line, checking each connection point, each buckle, each seal. Not because she didn't trust them, because this was what leaders did. She stopped in front of Sutherland, made eye contact through the mask. He nodded once. She returned it. The ramp began to lower. The roar of wind filled the bay. The jump light turned green. Graves went first, stepped into the black void, felt the immediate pull of gravity and wind. Then she was falling, arms out stabilizing, watching her altimeter count down. Around her, 4 shapes followed in perfect formation. 15,000 feet, oxygen masks off. 10,000 feet, still falling. 5,000 feet, pull. The parachute deployed with a hard jerk. Silence except for wind. She looked up, checked her canopy. Good. Looked around. 4 other canopies spread across the darkness. All good. She keyed her radio. Comms check. Sutherland, good. Cross, good. Briggs, good. Tremaine, good. They descended through the cold Syrian night. Below, the desert stretched endless and dark. No lights, no civilization. Just rocks and scrub and the kind of emptiness that swallowed sound. Graves hit ground first, rolled, came up scanning. The others landed within 30 seconds. Perfect interval. They collapsed their chutes, cached them under rocks, and formed up. She pulled out the GPS. 8 clicks northeast. Briggs, you're on point for the first 2. Sutherland, you take over at the halfway mark. Cross-monitor radio frequencies. Any chatter I want to know immediately. Tremaine, stay in the middle of formation. Move quiet, move fast. We have 3 hours, 40 minutes to target. They moved. The desert at night was a different kind of hostile. Cold instead of hot. Silent instead of windblown. Every footstep on loose rock sounded like a gunshot in Graves's ears. But they kept pace. Sutherland had learned discipline. He didn't rush, Didn't push. Just maintained steady progress. 2 clicks and Cross whispered over the radio. Multiple radio frequencies active. Enemy comms. Grid bearing 035. Estimate 1 click northeast. Graves raised her fist. They stopped. She pulled out the tablet, overlaid the intel map with Cross's bearing. Patrol, she said quietly. Not supposed to be here according to intel. We hold position. Let them pass. Briggs, eyes on. Briggs moved forward low, setting up on a small rise, his sniper rifle already tracking. Through the night vision scope, he could see them. 4 men, AK-47s, moving lazy, not expecting contact. 4 hostiles, Briggs whispered, passing south, 200 meters. We're clear in 90 seconds. They waited, breathing controlled, no movement. The patrol passed, faded into darkness. Clear, Briggs confirmed. They moved again. 4 clicks and halfway point. Sutherland took point. Graves watched him navigate the terrain. He was thinking now, reading the ground, choosing routes that offered cover. When they crossed an open stretch, he sent them across in pairs covering each other. Textbook. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He was doing it right. 6 clicks in, they hit the ridge overlooking the target compound. Graves pulled them into a depression in the rock. They set up observation. Briggs assembled his rifle. Cross deployed the directional antenna for signal intercept. Tremaine checked medical gear. Sutherland covered their 6. Graves glassed the compound through thermal optics. The intel had been wrong. I count 23 thermal signatures, she said quietly. Intel said 12. Main building east side. That's where they're holding the journalist. But we've got a problem. Sutherland moved beside her, looked through his own scope. The compound was bigger than briefed. More buildings, more guards. And the building where the journalist was held had only one entrance. A fatal funnel. The kind of approach that got people killed. What's the call, ma'am? Sutherland asked. Graves studied the layout, ran through options, every tactical approach she knew. Nothing clean, nothing easy. Then she saw it. The far building, smaller, separated from the main compound by 30 meters. Thermal showed 2 signatures inside. Cross, she said. Intercept on that building. Far west. What are they saying? Cross adjusted his equipment. Listened. His face went tight. Ma'am, that's where they're holding the HVT. High-value target, ISIS regional commander. Not in the original intel. Grace felt the mission shift under her feet. They'd come for one objective. Now there were 2. The journalist low risk, but critical for humanitarian reasons. The commander high risk, but strategic value that could save dozens of lives down the line. Split the team and risk both objectives. Go for one and miss the other. 4-hour window, Tremaine said quietly. We don't have time for both. Graves looked at the compound again. Calculated angles, timing, risk. Then she did something she'd learned from Hargrove years ago. She asked, Sutherland, if this was your call, what would you do? Sutherland blinked, looked at her, then at the compound. Ma'am, doctrine says primary objective only. Extract the journalist. That's doctrine, Graves said. What does your judgment say? Sutherland was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he spoke, voice steady. We split. Briggs and Tremaine extract the journalist. Fast and quiet. You, me, and Cross go for the commander. 2-minute window. Simultaneous breach. If we time it right, the confusion works for both teams. Graves watched him. That's not in any manual. No, ma'am, Sutherland said, but you taught us to adapt. She smiled, small, brief. Execute your plan, Corporal. Sutherland's eyes widened slightly. Then he understood. She was giving him tactical command, testing whether 3 days of training had built a leader or just taught obedience. Briggs Tremaine, Sutherland said, voice calm but carrying authority. You extract the journalist. Approach from the south wall. Minimal exposure. Or you have 4 minutes from breach to exfil point Alpha. Medical eval on site, stabilize for movement, then go. No heroics. Briggs nodded. Understood. Commander Cross with me. We breach the west building. Fast and loud to draw attention away from Briggs. Capture the HVT, flex cuff, and hood. Cross, you maintain comms with Tactical Ops Center. Get confirmation on HVT identity. Commander, you're on my 6. He looked at Graves. Permission to lead, ma'am. Granted, she said. I'll be right behind you. They moved into position. Briggs and Tremaine split off, disappearing into the darkness. Graves, Sutherland, and Cross approached the west building. Low, quiet, weapons up. 60 meters out. 50. 40. Cross whispered, radio chatter increasing. They're changing guard shift. 20 seconds. 30 meters. Sutherland raised his fist. They stopped. Waited. The guards moved. Shift change created a gap. 10 seconds of no coverage on the west approach. Now, Sutherland said. They moved fast, closed the distance, reached the wall. Sutherland checked the door, locked but simple. He pulled a breaching charge, small, quiet, set it, looked at Graves. She nodded. He triggered it. The door blew inward with a sharp crack. Sutherland was through before the smoke cleared. Graves followed. Cross behind her. 2 hostiles inside. One reached for his weapon. Graves put 2 rounds center mass. Training rounds in drill. Live rounds now, he dropped. The second hostile raised his hands. Sutherland controlled him, pushed him to the floor. The third man in the room was different. Older. Calm. Watching them with the kind of eyes that had seen violence before and wasn't afraid of it. Cross, Graves said, confirm identity. Cross pulled out a tablet, compared the face to the intel photo. That's him, ISIS Regional Commander, designation Apex 7. Outside, gunfire erupted. The main compound had realized something was wrong. Sutherland moved fast. Flex cuffed the commander, hood over his head. On your feet, move. They exited the building into chaos. Guards running toward the main building where Briggs and Tremaine would be extracting the journalist. Exactly as planned. The confusion working for them. But then the plan fell apart. A guard rounded the corner, saw them, raised his weapon. Sutherland turned, engaged, dropped him. But the sound brought more. 3 more hostiles converging. Graves stepped in front of Sutherland. Go, get him to the exfil point. Ma'am, that's an order, Corporal. Go. Sutherland hesitated for 1 second, then grabbed the commander and ran. Cross with him. Graves faced the 3 hostiles alone. They fired. She dove behind cover, concrete barrier, rounds sparking off stone. She returned fire. Controlled bursts. 1 hostile down. 2 remaining. They advanced, trying to flank. She moved. Combat rolled a new cover. Came up shooting. Second hostile dropped. The third got smart, pulled back, called for support. More gunfire from the main building. Briggs and Tremaine would be clear by now. Or dead. No way to know. Graves keyed her radio. Sutherland status. 30 seconds to exfil Alpha. HVT secure. Briggs, exfil Alpha journalist secure, wounded but stable. Relief flooded through her. Both objectives complete. Now she just had to survive. The third hostile appeared with 4 more. 5 on 1. Bad odds. She fired until her magazine ran dry. Dropped it. Reached for another. That's when the round hit. Not center mass. The plate caught most of it. But the impact knocked her back, drove the air from her lungs. She went down hard. Vision swimming, ears ringing. The hostiles advanced. Then gunfire from a different angle. Precise. Controlled. 3 rounds, 3 hostiles dropped. Sutherland appeared, rifle up, firing. Cross behind him, covering. They'd come back. Ignored her order. Came back for her. Sutherland reached her, pulled her to her feet. Can you move, ma'am? She nodded, couldn't speak. Yet lungs still screaming. Then we move. Now. They ran. Sutherland half carrying her. Cross covering their withdrawal. Behind them, the compound erupted into full alert. Searchlights, sirens, the sound of vehicles starting. But they'd made it to the perimeter. Into the darkness. The desert swallowed them. 1 click out, they reached the exfil point. Briggs had the journalist stabilize IV, running, talking quietly to keep him conscious. Tremaine was on security. The HVT was secured to a rock-hooded Silent. The helicopter came in low and fast. Black Hawk. Door guns manned. It touched down just long enough for them to load. Journalist, HVT, gear. Then up rotors, screaming bullets pinging off the fuselage as they climbed. Inside, Graves sat against the bulkhead, breathing hard, ribs on fire where the plate had caught the round. Sutherland sat across from her, covered in dust and blood, none of it his. "You came back," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "I ordered you to go." "Yes, ma'am." "You disobeyed a direct order." Sutherland met her eyes. "You taught us that leadership means getting your people home. All of them. Couldn't leave you behind." Graves stared at him, then at Cross, at Briggs and Tremaine. She wanted to be angry, should have been angry, but all she felt was pride. "That was incredibly stupid, Corporal." "Yes, ma'am," Sutherland said. "But it worked." She almost smiled. "Next time, follow orders." "Will there be a next time, ma'am?" Graves looked out the open door at the Syrian desert falling away below them. "We'll see." 48 hours later, Naval Station San Diego was bright and loud and felt like a different planet. The medical bay was quiet, though. Clean, safe. Sutherland sat with his ribs wrapped, bruised but not broken. Cross had his hands bandaged again, rope burns from securing the HVT. Tremaine was on a saline drip for dehydration. Briggs looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which was accurate. Graves walked in, out of uniform, civilian clothes. She looked almost normal except for the way she moved, careful, protecting her ribs. "Commander," Sutherland said, starting to stand. "Stay seated," she said. "This is off the record." She pulled up a chair, sat with them. "The journalist is stateside. Full recovery expected. He's talking to media. The HVT is in custody. Intel estimates his capture will prevent at least 3 planned attacks. Higher command is pleased." She paused. "You should know that Admiral Keller has authorized permanent assignment for all 4 of you to Task Force 7, effective immediately." They didn't react at first. Then the weight of it hit. "Ma'am," Cross said quietly, "after how we treated you." Graves looked at him. "You treated a stranger badly. Then you grew. That's what matters. The military doesn't need people who never fail. It needs people who fail, learn, and become better." Tremaine spoke for the first time. "We could have gotten you killed. But you didn't. You came back. You executed under impossible circumstances. You made tactical decisions that saved lives. That's what I evaluate. Not who you were, who you became." Sutherland leaned forward, wincing at his ribs. "Ma'am, I have to know. That first night, at the bar, did you know Cross was going to spill that second drink?" Graves was quiet for a moment. "I knew when he approached. Body language, trajectory, intent. The question wasn't whether he would, it was how you'd all react after. You were testing us the whole time. I was assessing you. Testing implies pass or fail. Assessment is watching what people do when they think nobody's judging, then deciding if they can be trained. You could. So I did." Briggs spoke, his voice carrying weight. "My father always said the best officers were the ones who saw potential in people others gave up on." "Your father was Force Recon," Graves said. "Iraq 2003. He knew what he was talking about." She stood. "You have 72 hours liberty. Then you report for integration training. You'll be helping me train the next attachment team." "Us?" Sutherland asked. "Training others. You know what it looks like when people make the mistakes you made? You are qualified to teach them not to." She headed for the door, then paused. "One more thing. There's someone who wants to see you." Master Chief Bill Hargrove walked in. He looked at the 4 Marines, banged up and exhausted, then at Graves. "They'll do," he said simply. "Yes, Master Chief," Graves replied. "They will." Hargrove pulled something from his pocket. 4 small pins, not tridents. Those were for SEALs. These were different. Joint Special Operations Task Force Integration Badges. Rare. Earned. He handed them out. 1 to each Marine. "Wore one of these in '91, he said. Desert Storm. Means you're qualified to operate with any unit, anytime, any mission. Means command trusts your judgment. Don't make us regret it." Well, Sutherland held the pin like it was made of glass. "Sir, I don't know if we deserve this." "You don't," Hargrove said bluntly. "Yet, but you will. Commander Graves saw something in you worth the time. I trust her judgment. Now prove her right." He turned to leave, then stopped. "And boys, next time you're in a bar and you see someone sitting alone, mind your manners. You never know who you're talking to." He walked out. The 4 Marines sat in silence, holding their pins. Finally, Cross laughed. Quiet, tired. We really fucked up, didn't we? Yeah, Sutherland said. We really did. But we fixed it, Briggs added. No, Tremaine said. She fixed us. 2 months later, Anchor Point Tavern looked exactly the same. Same dim lights, same broken jukebox, same old bartender wiping the same stretch of bar. Elena Graves sat at her corner table, back to the wall, water with lemon, fresh fries. The muted television showed a news report about the rescued journalist. She wasn't mentioned. That's how she preferred it. The door opened. 4 men entered, not loud this time. Respectful. They nodded to Ray at the bar. He nodded back. Then they saw her. Sutherland approached the table. Commander, mind if we join you? Graves gestured to the empty chairs. Operational or social? Social, ma'am, if that's allowed. Sit. They did. Ordered drinks. Sutherland got water. Growth. For a few minutes they just sat. Comfortable silence. The kind that comes after shared experience. Then Cross spoke. Ma'am, I need to ask. Why didn't you destroy us after that first night? Graves set down her glass. Because destroying people is easy. Building them is command. You could have had us discharged, Tremaine said. I could have, but then I would have failed, again. Briggs understood. Rourke. Graves nodded. I let someone silence me once. It cost a good man his life. You four taught me that command isn't about being louder. It's about being certain enough that volume doesn't matter. Sutherland leaned forward. We looked him up. Read the after-action report. That wasn't your fault, ma'am. I let myself be dismissed because I was afraid of being wrong. That was my fault. Leadership isn't about never being afraid. It's about speaking up anyway. You learn that or you don't. I learned it too late for Rourke, but maybe just in time for you. At the bar, Master Chief Hargrove sat down on his usual stool. Ray poured him a beer without asking. She's doing good, Bill, Ray said quietly. Hargrove looked at the table where 5 people sat together, laughing quietly, trading stories, the easy camaraderie of people who'd been through fire. She always was, Hargrove said, just needed to believe it herself. He raised his glass toward her. She caught the motion, looked over, raised her water glass in return. Ray leaned on the bar. That's what you fought for in Desert Storm, isn't it? Next generation getting it right? That's exactly what it was for, Hargrove said. Back at the table, Graves reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside, 4 pins, different from the integration badges. These were older, personal. Hargrove gave me mine 15 years ago, in this bar, after I failed pool comp for the 3rd time but kept trying. Said it was tradition. Pass it forward when you find people worth the investment. She handed them out, small trident pins, not official, personal, the kind that meant more than any medal. You've earned these not for what you did in Syria, for what you became in 3 days, for asking the hard questions, for admitting when you were wrong, for coming back for me when you could have left. Sutherland held his looked at it, then at her. Ma'am, we can never repay this. You don't repay it, Graves said. You pass it on. Lead the next ones the way I led you. Make them better than you were. That's the tradition. They sat for another hour, trading stories. Graves told them about her first failed training evolution. Sutherland admitted he'd been terrified the whole mission. Cross said he still had nightmares about that first spilled drink. Briggs stayed quiet mostly, but smiled more than he had in years. Eventually they left together, walked out to the parking lot under clear California sky. Cool night air, sound of the highway distant. Sutherland stopped before getting in his truck. Commander, one last question. That second drink, did you know it was deliberate? Graves looked at him. I knew when Cross approached. Body language, trajectory, intent. The glass was already tipping before he bumped it. Cross winced. Then why didn't you stop me? Because I was evaluating you. Sometimes the best test is watching what people do when they think no one's judging. You showed me who you were. Then you showed me you could change. That's all that mattered. She walked to her truck, started the engine, then rolled down the window. Tomorrow 0630, training the next integration class. Don't be late. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. She drove off. They stood in the parking lot, four Marines who'd been strangers a few months ago, who'd made every mistake possible, who'd learned the hardest lessons from the quietest teacher. "Should we tell the next class?" Cross asked. "Warn them." "Nah," Sutherland said. "Let them learn the hard way. That's the only way that sticks." They dispersed to their vehicles. The parking lot emptied. Inside the bar, Hargrove finished his beer. Ray was closing up, wiping tables, turning off lights. "Think she'll keep doing this?" Ray asked. "The off-duty evaluations." "She will," Hargrove said. "It's her methodology now. Learn by watching. Teach by letting them fail in small ways before they fail in ways that cost lives." That's a lonely way to lead. That's the only way to lead. Hargrove stood left cash on the bar and walked out into the night. 6 months later, new Marines entered Anchor Point. Young, loud, cocky. One of them gestured too widely, knocked over a drink. It splashed toward a corner table where a woman sat alone. Sutherland and Cross were at the bar, off-duty civilian clothes. They saw it happen. "Should we tell them?" Sutherland asked quietly. Cross watched the woman calmly dab at the spill. Reorganize her table. She wore a gray hoodie, no patches, no unit pride, just water and fries. She was new, not Graves, different evaluator, same methodology. "No," Cross said. "Let them learn." The woman stood, moved to a different table, and as she passed the Marines, she said something, too quiet for Sutherland and Cross to hear. But they saw the Marines' faces change, saw the moment they realized they'd made a mistake. Cross smiled. "The cycle continues." "Yeah," Sutherland said. "It does." And they finished their drinks and left. Outside, the base lights glowed in the distance. Somewhere out there, Commander Graves was preparing the next mission, training the next team, passing forward the lessons learned from a bar incident that had changed everything. And in a memorial corridor on base, under Petty Officer Daniel Rourke's name, a Navy cross was mounted. Below it, a small brass plate. For teaching us that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about being the last one standing when the loud ones fade. For showing us that second chances aren't given, they're earned. And for proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one who lets you keep talking long enough to reveal exactly who you are. Commander Elena Graves, United States Navy, SEAL Team 11, Joint Special Operations Task Force 7. And on nights when the bar was full and the stories flowed and young operators made the same mistakes 100 others had made before them, someone would always end up at that corner table. Back to the wall, water with lemon, fries untouched. 3 years later, Commander Elena Graves stood at the same memorial wall. The names had multiplied, new faces, new losses. But Rourke's photograph remained unchanged, smiling in his dress uniform. She wasn't alone this time. Sutherland stood beside her now, a staff sergeant training his own team. Cross had made communications officer. Briggs led sniper instruction. Tremaine ran combat medicine courses. "Ma'am," Sutherland said quietly, "the new integration class starts tomorrow. 12 Marines. I ran the pre-assessment last night." "Off duty?" Graves asked. "At Anchor Point, back corner table, water with lemon." She smiled, actually smiled, and 3 of them spilled drinks near my table, laughed about it. Didn't know who I was. "Did you tell them?" "No, ma'am. I let them talk, listened, assessed, just like you taught me." Graves looked at Rourke's photo one more time, touched the frame gently. "I got it right this time, Daniel," she whispered. "Took me 14 years, but I got it right." She turned to Sutherland. "The tradition continues. Train them the way I trained you. Not louder, quieter. Let them show you who they are before you show them who you want them to become." "Yes, ma'am." They walked down the corridor together. Behind them, the memorial wall stood silent, names in granite, faces frozen in time. Reminders that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about learning from failure, about giving second chances, about understanding that the quietest voice in the room was often the one worth listening to most. And somewhere in San Diego, at a dimly lit bar called Anchor Point, a new group of Marines was making their first mistakes, not knowing that someone was watching, not knowing that someone was giving them the chance to become something better. One spilled drink at a time.